Welcome to Business Success Navigators, brought to you by Empowering Business Inc. I'm Robyn Scobey, and today I am with a member of the CFIB. Could you introduce yourself, please?
I would be happy to. Thanks so much, Robyn. My name is Brendan Rolfe, and I'm the Senior Manager of our Business Resources Department for Western Canada for CFIB, and have been actually for the last 10 years.
Wow, 10 years is a really long time.
It seems to be these days, yeah.
Yeah.
That now that I say it out loud, yeah, it feels like even longer. But yeah, I've been very fortunate.
And what does that exactly mean? Like, exactly what are you doing? And
Yeah, so our Business Resources Department is actually like a human resources department. So we have 30 HR professionals across the country. So we have butts and seats in every major city center across Canada. And essentially our members have 24-hour access to our HR advisors via live chat, via email, and via telephone. And we can pretty much help you with anything HR related under the sun. Why we call ourselves Business Resources Advisors is because our services don't stop at human resources. We can actually help navigate tax issues, trade issues, all those wonderful types of things. Payroll, we can help you navigate interprovincial taxes, so selling to other provinces. So yeah, it's kind of HR plus. And so that means that, outside of direct legal advice, because we're not lawyers, and outside of actually managing our members' books, so pushing their numbers around, we can pretty much assist with anything that small business and medium-sized business owners have troubles with.
that's really interesting, because I always find that, I don't know how to put this nicely. I always find, like, as a business owner, you're really good at running, or you are good at what you are doing with your business, but it's very complicated to be able to run your business. It's not as easy as one would think.
That is so, well, I say that all the time. I say entrepreneurs are a victim of their own success, because they started a business because they got really good at something, and then that business grew. And now all of a sudden you find, my goodness, I have employees. What do I do managing people? I was never trained to do that. And of course, you're not going to have your own HR department if you have, 5, 10 employees. It doesn't make sense to have an HR manager. And so that's where CFIB BR comes in, is we can be that department. We literally have 30 people, 30 brains to lean on for our members.
How does somebody become a member?
Well, you can become a member by signing up either online. You can give us a shout and speak with one of our district managers. And they are, of course, always happy to chat, give more information. You can also connect with us on our website via live chat, or you can engage with us on social media. We're really easy to get to. And yeah, we can chat about whether it's right for your business. Because maybe we're not right for all businesses, but even if someone's just a sole operator, so that's a sole proprietor, essentially you have no employees, no subcontractors, we can still help you with the startup things like how to register your business, how to register a business name, how to incorporate, because you don't need a lawyer for those things. It feels like you might, but we can just talk you through it step by step.
And when to incorporate, because that was always one of those questions I always got was, when should I incorporate? When should I be doing what? How can I get neutral advice? And that's really what the CFIB is yes, they're advocating for you with the governments, but they're going to give you the advice, not necessarily to help your pocketbooks.
Yeah, that's right. And it's completely non-biased advice too. I mean, for example, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but if you call, for example, the Employment Standards branch of the government, they will tell you what the legislation is, but also know that they are still slanted toward an employee's benefit, just by nature. And what you'll find is you can call us with any issues, and we're going to give you the straight goods. And we're going to think about things as well, like human rights. We're going to think about workers' compensation, and we're going to include that in the advice that we give our members. Whereas, yeah, if you call Employment Standards branch, they only advise you based on the scope of the Employment Standards Act. So yeah, you get a fulsome picture with us, and we don't care what happened. We're in our members' corner, and we're going to try to help them to either avoid issues, or we're going to help them navigate the issues that they find themselves in. Yeah, with completely non-judgmental discussion.
Mm-hmm. And that was a really good point. When you started talking about, you call human resources for the government, they're going to give that, but they're going to leave out the WCB part. And should you have different insurances? Like, it's not just a straight yes or no answer ever.
That's right.
Running a business has, it's like a river with lots of different ways to go.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, there's always that human aspect, right? It's never just in a vacuum that you're trying to navigate situations, because inevitably, let's say I have an employee who comes in late by 30 minutes every single day and I'm frustrated, but now I find out that they have to drop their child off at school and they're a single mother or a single father. I have to take that into consideration and I have to try to make accommodations. So I couldn't just fire them. Whereas if you go to employment standards, they'll say, yeah, if they've been with you for less than 2 years, you pay them out 1 week, you're good to go. Whereas all of a sudden it's a human rights claim waiting to happen. So yeah, it's just a fascinating world.
Mhm. And what are some of those issues that you see, like most small businesses asking for advice on right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, termination and discipline is an area that is really challenging, and I think our members tend to lean on us for those areas that offer more exposure to their business, so the high risk areas. But also a really big one right now too is hiring and recruiting. I think I don't have to tell you that businesses across the country are struggling to find workers who, it's funny, before the pandemic, it was finding qualified workers. Now it's just finding workers who are going to be loyal and going to show up and do the job that they are hired to do. So a lot of businesses are struggling with that. So we get a lot of calls about that. Is there wage subsidies to help me with that? Where can I find workers? How do I write a great job ad to attract them? And along with the advice, we actually have a really great page. Anybody who's listening to this, it's a public page on our website called our Employee Management Center. We call it From Hiring to Firing. And essentially it gives free resources, so free templates. It gives free advice on how to source and find good workers and then to retain them. That's always the challenge too, is once you spend all that money to find a great worker, retaining them is so hard. It feels like you train them and then somewhere along the line they get offered more money by one of the big companies. You're like, well, you're welcome for being your training department, and now I got to go find another one. So yeah,
And it
lots
is
of
so
great tools.
expensive to hire and train. Like the amount
Oh,
of resources a small company puts into hiring and training, getting them up to that standard, right? So
yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
retention is huge.
They estimate, yeah. So some studies have estimated is anywhere from $4,000 to 10% of that worker's first year salary in wages, just to hire them, find them, hire them, retrain them to the point where they're a productive employee. So yeah, you're spot on. It is costly, and so we gotta figure out how to protect that investment by doing great things like training them when they get in, like making that onboarding process not just 1 week, but make it 3 months so that they feel like they're being really looked after. We see that the younger generations, like millennials and Gen Z, they really want their handheld and they want thank yous and they want things like that in the workplace. And it's a bit of a mental shift for a lot of managers. And it feels like a lot more work, but in the end, if you put in that work, then you protect that investment and you find that your turnover definitely decreases.
Hmm. I know in my past business, I actually had run an accounting firm and we were holding staff for almost, I think our average was 8 years.
That's
And some
impressive.
were a lot longer. But having those little perks of not necessarily hand holding, but rewarding. When a good job is done, you have to reward, you have to acknowledge.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I mean, that reward can be more than just monetary. Like we talked about, a thank you. It's funny how far that goes. There's studies on that too. It's studies for everything. And a thank you, I think increases, like regular thank yous increase your loyalty by I think like around 20%. But yeah, if you find other ways to say thank you too, like pay day off on a birthday or opportunities to volunteer at their favorite charity during business hours, or different ways just to make your workplace culture more attractive. So focusing on work-life flexibility, where if they have the ability to work from home for a couple days a week, offer that up. And it's exactly what workers are looking for these days is work-life balance and flexibility within their work.
Hmm. So is there any other tips that you could give to help retain a good employee?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things I always like to focus on as well is having an internal growth chart. So show your employees that you have a plan for them. I understand it can be challenging if you only have 5 employees, as you're not going to say, well, you're going to take over my business in 6 years. But have a growth chart for them, a growth path essentially that says, okay, in a couple of years, if we can achieve some of these outcomes, is maybe we can look at making you a team lead or a manager, or we can grow you in a different area of interest. You may have hired them to be a salesperson, but if they show some really great chops in the area of product development, or even like social media, great. Ask them what they want to do. Ask them what they want to do. Make them a part of the process. part of the goal setting process and say, great, let's figure out how to grow you there together. I'll mentor you myself an hour out of every couple of weeks, and we'll work on growing you internally. Because if we don't have a plan for them internally, they're going to find it somewhere else. It's just that job market now that's really tight, where good workers, they kind of have their pick of the litter, because like we mentioned, there's so few qualified workers out there who show that same level of loyalty. If we look at workers' resumes now, we see what used to be called job hopping. Now it's the norm, though, where you see a worker spend maybe a year and a half in a position, they moved on to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's really unnerving as a small business owner, because you say, well, if you're only going to be with me for a year and a half, then I don't feel like both feet are in. I don't feel like I should really be investing if you've got this history of job hopping. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge that all businesses are facing right now. And it's something that HR and our CFIB Business Resources advisors can absolutely help our members with.
That is a really good point, because it used to be job hopping. I remember looking at resumes 20 years ago going, oh, you only held a job for 2 years.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at them going, oh, you held a good job for 2 years.
Yeah,
Good job. You're
look
loyal.
at you. Yeah, exactly, right? What a shift. And I feel like especially the pandemic has really accelerated that shift, where all of a sudden the 2 years is the new norm. It's like, oh, great, you didn't leave after 4 months. So it's a weird world, but it's something that we're all adjusting to, and we're all trying to figure out the best way to essentially work with our staff.
Absolutely. So then let's talk a little bit, if things aren't going correctly and you do need to terminate them, they're after their 3-month or probational period. What are some ideas on how to do it so that you're not going to get a bad name for your company that you terminated them, as well as how you're not going to end up in those lawsuits?
Yeah, two very good questions. And I guess the first place I'd like to direct our listeners, is to the question of, is it will or is it a skill issue? Is it will versus skill? And I'll define what I mean by that. So will is essentially, does the worker want to be there? Do they want to improve? Do they want to get better? And you can always tell with the worker whether they have the will to get better by just, if you sit down with them and say, hey, I want to address this, this performance issue, this attitude issue. If they're kind of lean back and they're rolling their eyes, they're not like really engaged with it, they probably don't care. And you can never make someone care. Versus, is it a skill gap? If they want to improve, then you can teach them things. If they just didn't learn how to do a skill right in the first place, and that's why you're thinking about terminating them, approach that differently. I always say the number one thing I always look for if I'm recruiting, coachability. Far and away, it's coachability. If someone is coachable, they have a good attitude, and they want to be better, I can teach them anything. I can teach anything that I know. I'm an HR nerd, so I can't teach them how to do accounting work like you could. So I would say that's the first question. Is it a matter of will or is it a matter of skill? And then that determines how you go forward with them. You may have heard before the 3 strikes rule. The 3 strikes rule of disciplinary and termination is at first a verbal warning, and then it's 2 documented warnings. And after the 2 documented warnings, if they're still having the same issues, then you can look at terminating. And we always recommend as well is document the verbal warning just as like a sketch to show that it actually happened. And it's a very different discussion. Like I say, if it's a matter of skill, then I approach that discussion rather than a slap on the hand as, what can we do to support you? And again, get their input is literally, how can we help you? How can we support you to improve in this area? And they should have some ideas for you. If they don't, have some ideas prepared yourself. And then say, okay, we commit to supporting you. And again, document it in writing. We commit to supporting you in this area. We're going to follow up in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we're going to see how it's going. And if we need to, we're going to adjust. Now, it doesn't mean that after those two warnings or 2 development plans, I can't still terminate them, because the reality is, you can give me 2 weeks to learn how to fly a jet airplane. I'm probably not going to be able to do it very well or safely at that point. So you still have to look at letting me go. Whereas, like I say, if it's a matter of skill or will or attitude, now it's more of a slap on the hand discussion of saying, look, you can't talk like that in front of customers. It's going to repel them. If they keep doing it, then you probably have to cut them loose at that point too. So look at those 3 strikes, the verbal, 2 written warnings. In that final written warning, what the courts want to see is you made it very crystal clear that if it happened one more time, they will be terminated. Not so much up to and including. So we often hear that verbiage is, next steps, maybe disciplinary action up to and including termination. Kind of wishy-washy. The courts want to see it that's made very clear to the employee. If you do this one more time, we're going to terminate you. And then the question becomes, is it a just cause termination, which means that they get terminated with no notice. So they're outside that probationary period that you mentioned. Once an employee is terminated outside of those 3 months, they get compensation of some kind. So just cause means you get nothing, no working notice, no pay in lieu of notice, you're gone. Or is it without cause termination, which means we have to meet their employment standards minimums. And then for longer term workers, there's something called common law severance pay, which usually pays around 3 to 4 weeks per year if a worker chooses to go to a lawyer and says, I want to sue them for more money, essentially. And then so we figure out if it's just cause or not. And I'll be honest, just cause, maybe 2 or 3% of the cases, it was where it's actually warranted. Essentially, the employee has to do something either illegal or something so negligent or so malevolent and intentional that you can't trust them anymore. And it breaks that confidence in that employment relationship to the point beyond repair. Usually hard to prove. It can happen, like things like intentional time theft. That's often just cause worthy. But again, you got to document it. You got to show how it's damaged the business. And then from there, you can make your termination determination, and of course, give them their termination letter, their employment record of employment, and then you can move on from them and hopefully find the next employee who's a good one for you.
It is such a hard one, right? Like when you're saying only 2 to 3% is just cause.
Yeah.
You have to spend a lot of time documenting, making sure you know what's expected. And that would be really when I would think somebody should be calling the CFIB and talking to people.
Yeah.
And maybe even getting a little bit of a lawyer involved if we're looking at a long-term employee that suddenly they've just decided that they don't care.
Yeah, that's right. The longer term the employee, generally the more experienced they are, the greater their financial risk. So rather than that minimum employment standards payout of 1 week per year, we're going to see probably 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks per year under common law. And that's where, always give us a call, Business Resources first, because we don't charge legal fees because we're not lawyers. And if you do need to speak to a lawyer, we'll let you know. We're not shy about saying it. Look, this one's pretty spicy. Let's move this up and escalate to a lawyer. With CFIB, we actually do have legal resources, just no lawyers on staff. So we refer to, actually I'll mention them right now, Northbridge Insurance offer business insurance, but they have a big legal department, and our members get free access to their lawyers. So we're not afraid to escalate to lawyers when it goes outside of our scope of HR practice.
I actually had no idea that you guys had that ability. That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, because I'm a strong believer, especially with the cash flow of a business. If you can have a good employee and retain that good employee, your business will do much better long-term financially for that.
Yeah, no question. I mean, the financial impact, of course, is fantastic, and it makes sense that you approach from accounting point of view for sure. And then from HR, we say, but the impact on your culture, your workplace culture, I mean, that's priceless. Not only are you retaining workers and creating that culture of retention and loyalty, but now you probably have a happier workplace where people are more productive. Whereas if you keep cycling through employees, what we see is something called survivor syndrome, where even those employees who are not being terminated, they're worried for their job. So they're kind of got, again, half a foot in, half a foot out, where they're maybe keeping an eye on the job ads to see if, what do I do if I'm terminated from here? So you're not necessarily getting their full self at work. So great point. Financial impact as well as cultural impact, which again, everything impacts your bottom line, as you alluded to.
It absolutely does. It's that big circle. And I really feel like happy employees make a happy, not only for your customers and your clients, but when somebody's happy, it just spreads.
Oh, no question.
I think it spreads faster than the person that's grumpy in the back corner.
I agree. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's one of those contagious attitudes that definitely, happy employees can definitely overtake negative employees without question. And of course, if you got happier employees, it creates less problems for you as a business owner. So it's that trickle down as well as that trickle up effect where everybody wins for sure. So what we say is employees first, customers second, because happy employees, you're going to get happy customers. It just makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're just about out of time for today, but could you let us know again how somebody can become a member of the CFIB, as well as where they should be going to get the information?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can give us a call, 1-888-234-2232. That'll put you right through probably to a business advisor. You might even talk to me. You can go on our website, cfib.ca, and you can go on our live chat to ask questions. You can explore a little bit what CFIB is all about. You can even sign up directly right on our website if you wanted to. But we're always happy just to talk about ourselves, like most businesses are. We'll talk about our 3 pillars, which is lobbying, business resources, and then our savings as well. And then, yeah, there's no pressure. We're not going to say, well, sign up now or never. We're always happy to have an ongoing dialogue, like I say, to see if we are a good fit for your company. Because, yeah, it's not always one size fits all, but I can honestly say in most cases, we can probably help most small and medium-sized businesses.
I know when I had the accounting practice, we absolutely used you guys all the time for your resources during COVID.
Awesome. I'm
It
so
was
glad you're able to lean on us.
It's done in simple English, so I wasn't trying to sit there and figure out, am I allowed to be open? Am I not allowed to be open? It was, this is what the rules were.
Yeah,
And it
those
was
are weird times.
constantly changing.
Oh yeah, exactly. On a daily basis. It
Yeah.
got real weird, but I'm so glad, yeah, you're able to lean on us for that. We're so
Yeah.
appreciative.
So wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was a lot of good information. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Robyn. Appreciate your time.